Hi, my name's GravityKarma. I'm going to do this little video for Lockpickers United on the NATO Mersey locks, which I've got here. This one here is a 10 lever version, this one here is a 14 lever version, and this here is the casing from a very old 10 lever. So you can see a couple of changes over the years straight away. A couple of things like the bolt placement look and the shape of the warding around the key. We'll show you a number of other bits and pieces. So let's have a look at the 10 lever first. Taking this apart is quite an interesting experience right from the off, because these things were for very high security applications. You can see the NATO code and the serial number on the back. That little serial number there corresponds to the key. So because these were for the high security applications, you can't actually take the cover off, you can't take this thing apart unless you've definitely got the key. So that was a mechanism for making sure that the bitting was secure all the way from the factory to the installation. So turning the key lets me pop the cover off. I can turn the key back again and I can show you what it is that does. So in here there's a little peg, and this little peg here interacts with this bit of the bolt. So this is the bolt. You can have a quick look at the key. Let's just grab that 14 lever key as well, and you'll see that they're the same blank more or less, but obviously the 14 lever has got a bitting for a lot more levers than the 10, unsurprisingly. You'll see some keys which are a little bit different to this. They look like makeup keys, so they've obviously got the same kind of profile to them, but they look like they've been made up out of little segments, and they are genuine keys. That's just how they were made for a little while. Before then there was a plastic key, but I've never actually seen a plastic key. So these later ones are brass. So let's undo these two things and then we'll have a little bit of a look. A couple of things to note whilst we're here. You can see there are some guides here for the bolt, and you can see these two little pins that are kind of free to float around a little bit, and they'll be important a little bit later. Okay, so flip this over, pop the cover off, and you can see a number of things. Obviously this is a lever lock, so you can see that there are two lever packs, so one here and one here, and you can see the stump that they interact with is here. This is quite a late 10 lever, and so it has another locking mechanism as well. You can see this little bolt here, this little pin which passes through the bolt, and this is actuated, this is moved by this bit of the curtain. So one of the first things you need to do if you're picking one of these is to turn this curtain so that bolt retracts, or this pin, sorry, retracts through the bolt, and the bolt itself then is free to be tensioned. The earlier 10 levers, and in fact the 14 levers, have got a curtain that looks like this, and you'll see that there's no mechanism there for that lifting that pin. That's because that little pin doesn't exist on them, so that's an extra security feature. Talking about the sort of historical differences, again the early ones had a kind of a plastic casing that looks a little bit like this. It has the same function, but apparently these bits here kept breaking, so they ended up reducing it to this. The function of this kind of plastic casing is to hold that bolt and to control the kind of lateral movement of it, which is actually something you can exploit, that little bit of lateral movement, in picking. So if I take that off, look, you've got quite a bit more play. So let's put this one aside and have a look at one that I've kind of already stripped down a little bit. You see it's the same thing. This is just to make it a little bit easier to show you what's going on and why this lock is special and interesting. as with most lever locks, you have to move the lever such that the stump can then pass through the true gate like that. And because there are two packs of levers, you'd have to do that to both sides. Oops. You'd have to do that to both sides like that, and then the lock can open. And again, like most levers, you've got some false gates, look. And actually these stumps are really kind of aggressively lock in place into those false gates. It's really, really hard to get out of them. A couple of other features. So you can see that the contact area in the belly of the lever is reduced in order to make it harder to scope, in order to see what's going on. And there's also, and I'll show you this properly in a minute, there's also radiological protection, so this is protected by a little bit of lead from X-rays, and I'll show you how cool that is in just a sec. So we come to the bit that really makes the Mersey locks difficult to pick and makes them unusual, and that's this kind of mechanism here. So when you're tensioning, you're pushing the bolt, and you can see that something interesting is going on there. The stumps on the bolt push on the levers. The levers are pivoted, but this pivot is not fixed to the case. And so if I take this one off for a moment, you can see that actually it pivots on this little thing, which in turn is free to pivot. And any pressure on the lever will push this way and cause this little bit here to lock in to the bolt like that. And so you can see it in action on this side, look. As soon as I give it a bit of a push, that all locks up. That then makes any further attempt at picking sort of redundant, really. You can't, it doesn't matter where the levers are compared with the gates, you're stuck. And so that's the principal security feature. I said I'd show you that radiological element. So let's pop this out and take the bolt out entirely. And there you can see that the lead core, there's a steel bit there as well, look. The lead part of the bolt has got these kind of little fins on it right over the bitting in order to help to disguise what's going on with those levers. So really secure, really nice bit of kit. And there you can see this is the section that cover locks into, in order to lock that in place. So really nicely designed, really clever thing, nice bit of kit. Let's then have a look at the 14 lever version. It's a little bit different, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some picking maybe. So again, unlock in order to take the thing apart, and again, let's just move some of these things. I've got same kinds of things. You know a little bit now about what you're looking at. So this here, this pin, is the pin that floats freely, the one that the levers pivot on. And you can see that actually this whole mechanism is intact. And as I push on the lever, push on the bolt, sorry, the levers interact with the stump, and this bit here locks that bolt in place. The earliest version, when we looked at it was taken apart, the earliest version I've got is 1973. And you'll see this one here is 2004, so they were in service for a long time with relatively few revisions. One very useful revision, in my opinion, is this, the retaining clip for the curtain, and there's a little detent in there that gives a nice positive kind of click. Notice that there's no ramp, there's no kind of bolt locking mechanism, no pin there, look. You'll also see that the levers look a little bit different. So the contact area is even more reduced. The aim there, of course, is to try and stop you from scoping, from looking at it and judging the fitting by the wear. And you'll see a couple of other things, especially if I take this off. So you'll see there's now a spring on the bolt. So this here is kind of an over-center spring, so as you retract the bolt it kind of fires it backwards, and as you return it forwards it kind of fires it forwards into place again. You'll see on the 10 lever, or you might recall from the 10 lever, here's one of the levers from it, that there's false gates. There aren't many in any of the 10 levers I've got with 2 sets of false gates, but you'll see on the 14 lever here quite a few of the levers have got a couple of false gates in. Now I suspect that's mostly bitting related, but it's interesting nonetheless. The levers are a little bit thinner, as you might expect, so you can see that. Other than that, there aren't a huge number of differences. There aren't a huge kind of range of differences here. So a couple of things about picking these. Well, one, it's incredibly, let's have the full version of here. Essentially you're kind of tiptoeing or you're balancing a very fine tension line where you need enough tension in order to be able to cause there to be a little bit of friction between the levers and the stump, but without engaging that blocking mechanism entirely. And so you need to kind of sit about here with a little bit of tension on, but not blocked up entirely. You can kind of exploit a little bit of that sideways play in order to increase the tension on one side just a little bit more than the others, which I'll do here. I would normally do this with obviously by pushing on the bolt here, but I'm just going to do it by pushing here, and then I'm just going to hook these in place. So let's have something a little bit stiffer. Let's use a conventional tension tool. Once you've got one side picked, as you can kind of see here, that blocker is now out of play. The levers have sprung forwards a little bit, and now you can just concentrate on the other side. And so with your picking wire, this is the one I use for most, you can hop up in here, and I actually don't pick these on the belly. I come right up here in the top and I pick the levers up here like that, and you can slowly work your way through. There's a few videos of me doing this with a cutaway back. Have a look at my channel if you want to see those. 14 lever here is very much the same. This one here is a little bit more modern, and so this kind of blocking mechanism activates even kind of sooner. So there's a couple of little things. You can either tread that very delicate balance, or there's actually something else you can do in order to get everything in your favour a little bit more. And I'll show you this with a cover on. So I'm going to pop this cover on. Now, there are all sorts of mechanisms, there's ways of doing this next little trick. This one that I'm going to show you is mine, that I've used to pick this, but I know that there are other pickers out there that have done something similar. So now look, you've got these two kind of keyways, or these two places I can pop this tensioner. This one here is going to slide in. I'm going to lock it into the bolt there, so you can kind of see that that is now tensioning on the bolt. Now you can see that I've cut this short, or this key is quite short, so it doesn't sit all the way in. So that lets you either push the bolt to one side a little bit, which you may be able to see there, and it also allows you to push the tensioner in like that, and therefore clamp all of those levers together. And so if I just pop a wire in, I can push on that tensioner. I'm now, oops, there we go, I'm pushing on the tensioner, I'm clamping all those wires together, and look, I can move the stack around without those levers jumping back, because I'm kind of pushing them all together. Okay, and so that's a really good technique. That lets you pick one side, and as we've kind of seen, or as you might see here, once you've picked one side, you've basically got a 5 little bit very tricky, but you've got a 5-lever lock to try and pick. So that evens the odds in your favour somewhat. So there you have the NATO Mersey 10-lever and the 5-lever and the 14-lever. Very interesting locks. Check out my channel if you want to see more of those, or send me a message on Discord or whatever. I'm very happy to talk about these, talk about picking them, and all of them kind of other little tips and tricks. If you have got other ways of picking these, then don't be afraid to share.